Imagine being inside the most complex and dangerous machine ever constructed by human hands. Around you are miles of cold, vibrating steel pipes, where subatomic particles race at nearly the speed of light, particles with enough energy to shatter your DNA. This was the U-70 Synchrotron in Protvino, a secret Soviet scientific hub. On the 13th of July 1978, the facility was filled with the low hum of high-voltage electricity. Anatoli Bugorski, a brilliant young physicist, was working his usual shift when a piece of equipment began to fail. He was tired and in a hurry, making a mistake that should have been his last. Due to a catastrophic failure in safety protocols, a mechanical lock failed to engage while the beam was active. Bugorski leaned forward, moving his head directly into the path of an invisible, concentrated stream of protons. He felt no pain, no heat, and no pressure. Instead, he saw a flash of light so intense it defied description, a brilliance he famously called brighter than 1,000 suns. He had just looked into the barrel of a nuclear cannon, and the trigger had been pulled. Doctors would later calculate that the beam entered through the back of his skull and exited near his nose. In any other scenario, a human receiving this kind of radiation would have been killed instantly. For a human, 500 rads is considered a fatal dose. The proton beam that sliced through Bugorski's brain was estimated at 200,000 rads at the point of entry, increasing to 300,000 rads at the exit. His brain should have been cooked from the inside out. Yet, after the flash, Anatoly simply stood up, finished his maintenance log without saying a word to anyone, and went home, waiting to see what would happen to a man struck by man-made lightning. By the next morning, the nightmare was visible. Bugorski's face began to swell so violently that he was barely recognizable as a human being. His left ear rang with a constant deafening whistle, and the skin on the back of his head started to blister and turn an angry, deep purple. He was rushed to a high-security clinic in Moscow, a place specifically designed for victims of the most horrific nuclear accidents. The doctors, there were veterans of the Soviet atomic program, used to seeing the worst radiation could do, but even they were in shock. They had never seen a patient survive such a concentrated, high-energy strike to the brain. They moved him into a quiet ward, a room reserved for those sent to spend their final hours in peace. Over the next few days, the path of the beam became a roadmap of absolute destruction across his face. The skin literally began to peel away in long, thick strips, revealing the raw, weeping tissue beneath. His hair fell out in a perfect straight line, where the protons had burned through his scalp like a hot wire. The radiation had not just scorched his skin, it had traveled through his brain's left temporal lobe and into his inner ear. His left facial nerve was completely destroyed, leaving that side of his face paralyzed, frozen in time like a dead mask. Medical staff watched his vitals with grim expectation, waiting for the massive brain swelling or the total organ failure that usually follows such exposure. Physicists theorized that because the beam was so incredibly narrow and moving at such high velocity, it didn't have the chance to scatter its deadly energy into the surrounding brain cells. It had punched a microscopic, surgical hole through his life, but the foundation remained intact. As the years passed, the most haunting and surreal side effect of the accident began to manifest. While the right side of Bugorski's face aged naturally, developing the wrinkles and sagging skin of a man moving into his 60s, the left side, the side struck by the proton beam, remained perfectly smooth and youthful. Because the radiation had obliterated the nerves and damaged the underlying tissue, the muscles on that side of his face never moved again. This lack of movement meant that wrinkles could never form, as if time had stopped for half of his head on that July morning in 1978. He became a living biological paradox, a man whose face was divided between two different decades. One half reflected the natural passing of time, while the other remained a frozen monument to the day he stepped into the path of a nuclear cannon. Bugorski didn't just survive. He defied every medical prediction by thriving. Despite recurring violent seizures and permanent facial paralysis, he returned to the world of high-level physics. He completed his PhD and continued his research at the same institute where the accident occurred, even holding a position as a coordinator for physics experiments. For over a decade, the Soviet government kept the entire incident a state secret, hiding the evidence of their failure behind a wall of bureaucracy. Bugorski was strictly forbidden from speaking about what happened, even to other scientists. He was a man who had survived a nuclear disaster in total silence. It wasn't until the collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s that his story finally reached the public. His life stands as a stark reminder of the terrifying power we have harnessed in our search for the secrets of the universe. Anatoli Bugorski remains a living monument to how fragile, and yet how incredibly resilient, human life can be. He proved that even when you are prodded by the cosmic forces of the universe, the human spirit can simply refuse to break.